Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Study Chronicles. Today I'm going to be continuing our spot importance drills. We're going to cover cutoff versus the big blind. So we've covered the small blind versus the big blind. We've covered button versus big blind. We've covered hijack versus big blind. Now we're moving on down to the cutoff. You'll notice that it's not in any particular linear order, but it's rather in an order of spot importance. So the most common scenarios were typically going to be out of the big blind and in a single raise pot. So we're covering all of the single raise pot scenarios, and then we're going to start moving on to some other scenarios like 3-bet pots, which also have a high spot importance. So yeah, we're just going to jump right in and check out the strategy for the cutoff versus the big blinds. Let me open up GTO Wizard here. And we're going to open up our pre-flop ranges for the general 500 GTO. These are the ones that I've always used for this series. And we will look at the cutoff opening range. So there's a couple of significant things that change from the hijack to the cutoff, and that's the sizing that GTO Wizards decides to use for these solutions. We go from a min raise to a 2.3x. So what you'll actually see is a difference in the frequency of opening drastically go up. However, if we were to keep this raise at a min raise, it would go up even more in the cutoff. So we would probably cross over 30% frequency if we were to still use the min raise. So using the larger using the larger raise is going to typically tighten up your range when you open because you don't have as good of a price to steal. Players from the later position like button and blinds aren't folding as much to you against the cutoff. So if we do have this min raise, we'll see a difference in not only opening, but also defending from the big blind. But we are using the 2.3 for this example. If you want to use a larger sizing, that's fine. If you want to use a smaller sizing, that's fine. But whatever it is, make sure that you study it in and out from both perspectives. So once we open here, we'll see that the worst threshold hands are going to be hands like King 3 suited, Queen 5 suited, Jack 7, most of the 7x suiteds that are fairly connected, some Queen 6. Offsuit combos include as weak as Jack 9, 10 9, King 9, Ace 8, Ace 5. When I first started learning the solutions to 6-max, the hand that surprised me most was probably Queen 5 suited. I just didn't think it was going to be that weak, but yeah, got to be comfortable with opening some of these Queen high weak hands, King high weak hands, and then of course all of your pocket pairs. But a mix of 3s and 2s are still going to fold. Even from the cutoff, we're not really too excited about 3s and 2s, just not a strong hand in general. Outside of that, yeah, that's going to be what our cutoff range looks like. And then defending as the big blind, we will see that we have a larger than normal, if you will, sizing. So a lot of players don't typically use a 13.5 big blind 3-bet. I have a feeling that this is a very unique scenario for 3-betting this sizing, given the range, the spike in the range frequency of opening pre-flop for the cutoff. We see that the hijack is very tight, still 20% opening range, but then once you get to the cutoff, that's where you have a significant spike and kind of like move into the later positions, right? So you have early position kind of classified as under the gun and hijack, and then you have later position kind of classified as cutoff and button. So that threshold there, you see this spike, and then you're going to see some different sizings used by a GTO Wizard. Now, I'm not exactly sure exactly why the big blind decides to go larger, but my guess is that this is just the threshold in which the later positions start to get a little looser. And also you'll see a large raising against the button. I think we have a 13 big blind sizing against that too. So you'll see that little shift in sizing from the big blinds. Against the hijack, you'll see 12.3, and then against under the gun, you'll see, I think, just 12. So as you can see, like against the tighter ranges, you see the sizings, maybe not going down every single notch, but you do see a difference in the sizings. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at our defense range here. Having some offsuit aces are going to be good, but not all of them. Some of the weaker ones are just going to be folding. We're turning ace 4 off into a bluff at a frequency. I'm not doing this enough, to be honest. That might be one of my leaks, again, is just not playing these offsuit weak aces enough as an aggressive play. Like, I'm not 3-betting ace 8, ace 9 offsuit enough against the cutoff. So I guess we could even just start putting that in before we start. We'll do cutoff today, and then next we'll do the big blind, and then I'll have some leaks here. One of my leaks is not 3-betting enough out of the big blind with weak aces, right? Right away, we have a leak that we can target and keep in mind while I'm running the drills. So we're going to keep that in mind. There we go. So what else are we defending out of the big blind? It looks like some offsuit weak connected combos like Jack 9, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8, 7. We're not defending every single suited combo. There are some folds from the suited combos, the weakest parts of our range here. 10, 5 seems to be the threshold here. Jack 3, the threshold for suited jacks. A lot of the offsuit combos are folding. Queen 9, Queen 8, King 8, Jack 8, etc. Yeah, looks pretty good. And then this is kind of an important thing to understand, is where are the thresholds for the strong hands, because when certain board textures come off, it's important to know, okay, does the big blind lack some, pocket jacks in this spot because they flatted? And the answer is the jacks plus is where the threshold is for the pocket pairs. Ace king off is going to be a pure 3-bet. Ace queen suited. So those high card boards are going to lack a lot of the really strong hands like ace king, aces, kings, jacks, queens, etc. So keeping that in mind, looking at just the calling range here from the big blind, it looks a little better to see what's missing. And then some of the suited broadways are going to be a fairly high frequency 3-bet. And then you have a bit of more polarized combinations for 3-betting, like suited kings, suited queens, even some weak suited jacks. Again, it's just that's kind of the threshold for the pairs of really strong hands in the cutoff, right? So if we end up 3-betting some of those hands, it starts to call these combos here. Having any of these suited suited hands blocks those aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens. So a hand like Jack 6 suited blocks pocket jacks, which is going to be a 4-bet frequency. Ace Jack offsuit, which is a 4-bet. So blocking these strong hands here out of the cutoffs, continuing range versus a 3-bet is very nice. So that's why we see some of those, what seemingly look like random weak hands. They all have a purpose in blocking the stronger parts of villain's range with these high card combos in them. Okay. All that being said, let's create a drill. I haven't created a drill yet, so we'll do it together real quick. So we'll do a new one, and we're going to keep everything consistent. So cutoff and big blind here. I think everything else is already set up for us. So all I have to do is save and study cutoff versus big blind, single raise pot. Okay. All right, let's get to drilling, shall we? We are drilling for poker strategy. All right. So first of all, how is our lead frequency, right? We looked at leading a couple of times out of the big blind. We saw that the later position we're in as the hero, the villain is going to lead more often. So against the button, the big blind is going to lead the most. And then under the gun, big blind is going to lead the least. Cutoff is going to be on the higher frequency side of leading for the big blind. So just keeping that in mind. King Queen 8. This is a board texture in which, as we saw, villain's going to lack a lot of really strong hands. Doesn't have ace king, doesn't have queens plus. So this is a texture where I think we can have all of the sizings. We can have small, medium, large, and overbet. This particular hand, I think, fits into a small or check frequency. First of all, let's take a look at our aggregated reports and see how often we're going to c-bet the scenario. Is it going to be closer to the button frequency of 46% check, or is it going to be closer to the under the gun frequency of 30% check? It looks like it's going to be a mix of in between, which is no surprise. 41% check frequency. So we still have a, fairly high frequency check. I think 41% is checking more often than most players are comfortable with, but against, yeah, I see players often c-bet closer to like 60 or 70% of their range from every position. And that is a big mistake when it comes to the later positions over c-betting, because when players know how to defend their big blinds against that, you're just going to have way too many weak hands on the turn. You're going to be every time you get check raised, you're going to have to fold a lot. It's just, it's very difficult as the original raiser if you're c-betting over 70% from the cutoff. Now, that being said, it could be a good exploit for players not used to being, able to deal with aggression, but I recommend just trying to get as close to this check frequency as you can. Okay, so we have 40% check, and then again, we have all of the options for bets. So we have 125, 75, 50, and 33, 33 and 50 being the most common. Seemingly the same kind of trend as under the gun, as hijack, as button. We're just going to always have 4 sizings, with the most common sizings being these smaller ones. So let's look at this particular scenario. King Queen 8. Again, I think this is going to be a small bet or check. King 5 is not the worst king in our range from the cutoff. King 3 is. But it kind of is grouped into that category of just really bad King X that doesn't have a lot of, triple barrel incentive. It's more of a hand that wants to get 1 or 2 streets of value. So I can see this being a high frequency check or the small bet. I'm going to go, knowing that we have a global c-bet percentage of 60, I think this hand wants to lean towards small bet at a small frequency. Yeah, but you see mostly checking, and then a mix of medium and a mix of large even. The large bet sizing could be because we have a very strong range on this texture, so a lot of our range is comfortable with betting the large sizing. All right, Queen 10. Again, pretty good board texture for us. I think big blind's going to lack a lot of the stronger Queen X. Ace Queen suited. King Queen suited is going to be mixing 3 bets. Queen Jack suited is mixing 3 bets. I'm going to go with this small bet here. We rolled aggressive, 19%. Looks like a fairly high frequency c-bet. Once we get to the turn, what kind of properties does this hand have? Well, initially it just looks like a really trash hand. We don't really have much equity, but we do have some good blocker effects. We block ace queen, which is relevant here. We do block something like pocket 8s or 10-8 suited, ace 10. Not the best blocker, not the best equity. I think this is primarily going to be a check. We'd much rather have something like Jack 9 here. We'd have something like 5-6 of spades, ace 5 of spades, something with more equity to continue betting. This might be a spot I am checking too high of a frequency because I rolled aggressive. So if I ever go ahead and bet here, is this a hand that wants to triple barrel bluff? And I think the answer is no. So we're just going to check. Yeah, this is a good check. Once we get to the river, now this is one of those spots where you have to really think, what am I going to get paid by if I bet here, right? Obviously, we're losing to trips. 10x is seemingly the only hand that really loves calling versus a bet here. Even then, not really excited about calling with a 10. 9s, 8s, and 7s are all just really tough to find calls with. But now what are we beat by? We're only beat by trips, and we're only beat by ace jack plus, which includes some combos of trips with ace queen, or a full house, I should say. So if we're only losing to, like, I guess we're losing to 10-10 slow played as well, 4-4, but not too many combos we lose on the river. This is close. I would definitely bet ace jack plus. I just don't know if ace 8 is in there. Maybe at a mix. We rolled right in the middle though. All right. I think if villain is forced to call with like 8s and 7s and 9s, this is not a bad bet. Although we do block an 8 also. Yikes. Let's just try. Let's try go for a thin bet. I have a feeling it's going to be close. Yeah, so it's a mix between bet 60 and check. Usually I find when I'm on the fence of whether or not to bet a hand, it's because it's indifferent. It's right on that cusp of like being obvious to bet, but being, you know, too weak to not bet. It's just, that's when you kind of find these indifferent spots. And intuitively, it just over time, the more you practice, the more you'll like find that threshold in most scenarios and understand like, okay, they're calling with these hands. I'm getting check raised by those hands. They beat me with these hands. We beat those hands. And then just kind of figuring out that sweet spot for value betting. King Jack 3. So again, we have all the options. We rolled a 7. So that's a very aggressive roll. I don't mind overbetting here. We have decent equity with spades. So let's go for it. There it is. Next hand, ace 6-2. Going to... We rolled very aggressive. Is this a board texture that favors us? I think this is a board texture that villain has a lot of strong hands because they can have 6-6 and 2-2 at full frequency. They're going to have ace 6 suited. I think also at full frequency, ace 2 suited is maybe a mixed 3-bet, but there are a lot of strong hands for big blind here. I don't think we can get too out of line with c-betting this board. We have king high, which in theory, I guess, has some showdown value. We did roll aggressive, and our global c-bet is 60%. So I'm so hesitant. I feel like king queen might be a pure check, and then this one could be a mixed bet. So let's go for, yeah, okay. This one is also a pure check. It was kind of close, but this is definitely going to be thrown in the check frequency. If we had hearts, I think we would see more of a bet here with king 9. It's just one of those hands that falls in between having no real equity and also just enough showdown value that it makes sense to check at a high frequency. So if we take a look, king 9 of hearts is even a high frequency check. So we're only c-betting king 9 of spades, and then the worst king X that we're betting is going to be more like king 4 or king 3, which makes more sense because this has more backdoor equity. It blocks more continuing range from the big blind. Big blind's going to be able to check raise hands like 4-5 suited, 3-4 suited, etc. So that's why we see the bottom part of our king X's betting and the top end more so checking. as well as course of, you know, having more showdown value with king queen versus having something like king three. And you can even see that king queen suited is a high frequency check as well, which makes sense. All right, so moral of the story there is be careful with your hands that have showdown value, mixing them as a bet, because it kind of ruins their showdown value, opens us up to getting check raised. All right. Jack 6-4. This is a texture I think we have all the sizings on. I rolled a 12, which is very aggressive. Again, though, we have one of those hands that just has decent showdown value with not a lot of equity. But this is going to play better than something like king high on an ace high board because we have two overcards, right? And we have significant blockers to the jack. We block ace jack and queen jack, two hands that villain's going to have to call down 3 streets with at a high frequency. So this does have some relevancy in betting, I think. It's one of those things. Yeah, I think we can have some mix of bet here. We would prefer the backdoor combo. I'm fighting in my head whether to check or bet here, and if we do bet, what sizing, because we rolled a 12. I mean, this kind of makes sense to overbet at some frequency. Let's go with a large bet. I think the safe choice is a small bet or check, but I'm going to try a large bet this time. Yeah. So the safe choice, like I said, is check or bet small. That's going to be primarily the strategy when you have a hand like this, ace queen. It's kind of like a merge bet in a way because this hand is the best hand a lot of the time. So we're almost getting value / semi bluffing because we can continue on some turns as a weaker hand. But yeah, I did use the large bet and it wasn't a blunder per se. The EV is the same as check, but it is a very low frequency play. Most of the time we should just be checking or small betting that hand. 7-6-2, we pull off the ace of spades here, which has a lot of equity. We roll aggressive. I think this is just going to be a standard bet 33, maybe even some bet 50. I think players don't use this bet 50 enough on monotone boards. But as a trend, I typically just small bet because I know it's never going to be wrong as a sizing. Turn. So now we have to decide, are we going to polarize on the turn? We rolled literally the most aggressive number. So if we were to ever have an overbet on a monotone flop, this is it. We have the ace of spades, which is the nut blocker. We have, little equity, no pair with our ace. This is actually the second worst ace we can have. We can also have ace 8 offsuit, I believe, but this I think falls perfectly into an overbet frequency if there is ever an overbet. So let's try the overbet, but it could also just be a pure 75 sizing. Yeah, there is a 4% overbet here, which we found. Very low frequency, but it does exist. I think in general, most of our range wants to bet large on the turn. Yeah, so only 1% overbet. So you could simplify your strategy to just betting large. But there is that element of using the absolute nut blocker and the nuts in the overbet size. If we do, then I think this is actually just going to be an all-in. Because at this point, we're repping the nuts or this hand, right? The nuts, this hand, and maybe like ace 8, ace 10 offsuit at some frequencies. So I think all in is the play if we do overbet the turn. Nope, pure check. Shows how much I know. The EV is the same for all in, so it's not quite a blunder, but it is a very low frequency shove. So I wonder if we're better off shoving. What are we better off shoving then if we don't shove this hand at a full frequency? Let's see. Let's learn something. What are we shoving the river with? So we are shoving 31% of the time, and it's mostly going to be the nuts and the second nuts for value. But if we filter for the trash hands, we see that, interestingly, the king-queen combos are more of a shove than the ace-high combos. I wonder if that's because villain is going to not have as many suited aces by the river to call with than they are having these suited kings. So if we shove here, what is villain getting to the river with that they're calling? It looks like... Looks like villain has more suited aces than suited kings. So I wonder why we're not shoving with the ace 8 and the ace 9. With the spade. Is it because we're blocking an 8 or a 9? That's bad. Huh. This is interesting. Why does the solver want us to shove the second nut blocker, but not the first nut blocker? Even something like King Jack of spades is going to be probably we still have equity checking. That's a very good point, Njord. Yeah, maybe we actually still win at showdown with that hand. Also, villain is going to get to the river with a single ace high spade, right? So if we see a shove from cutoff, the way that big blind has to respond with an ace of spades is actually fold some of the frequency and call some of the frequency. So we're actually getting ace high to fold when we have king high. You see ace jack is just going to be a pure fold once you see a jam here. So maybe, yeah, so maybe we have these, as the big blind, we have these king highs, which just lose to the ace highs that have showdown value. That would make a lot of sense. Also, on top of the fact that there's just more good things that happen when we bluff the king high versus bluffing the ace high. I understand not bluffing ace king and ace queen, right? But it looks like it's more about not the showdown value, but having that ace of spades. I think it has a lot to do with blocking the big blind's folding range. When we have the ace of spades, they have to do a lot of folding with the ace of spades. So you see all these combos that are folding with just the ace of spades. I think that's most to do with it, right? Because they don't have too many bare king of spades, but they have all of these weak hands with an ace of spades. And then they still have a comparable amount of suited kings for calling as suited aces. So I think that's why we see that. I have not been doing that enough. I've been using the ace of spades way too much as my bluff, which is interesting. Yeah. I think most people have, actually. I think this is kind of what most people think the meta is, that they just bluff like this in this spot. That was an interesting hand. And they had king queen. Look at that. Perfect example. Look at that. Don't you just love when you go and study and you end up seeing the actual thing happen? That's kind of cool. All right. Next hand, 8-7-6. This is a texture that is going to be good for the big blinds. So I think we're going to do a lot of checking. However, we did roll a 1, which is the most aggressive roll again. Looks like the solver just wants us to be aggressive today. Queen Jack suited has a lot of equity. So I think betting the larger sizing is going to be good when we roll aggressive. So what is the largest sizing we can bet here on a board like 8-7-6? Well, we have 10-9 suited. We have 10-9 offsuit. It wouldn't be so crazy, I think, to overbet at a frequency. Overbet or large bet. I'm going to go with the safe option here and large bet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see an overbet. So it looks like large bet was not the safe option, rather half pot was. So half pot's the largest sizing we use with this combo. Do we ever have an overbet on that texture? Maybe not, because I don't think we have a big nuts advantage, right? So maybe there is no overbetting on 876. Yeah, there's not really any overbetting, but there is a little bit of 75% in there. But the main sizing is going to be smaller or half pot. So on these textures where we don't have a big advantage, it makes more sense to have these half pot sizings. As you can see, you know, the best hand advantage is nearly at par, and the good hands are all very similar. So I think you're going to see a lot of half potting as the larger sizing here. Makes sense. Versus a lead after we bet large, I think we can mix raise and call. This hand really wants to just see and realize equity, so I think calling is better than raising, but yeah. Okay. Solver wants to raise aggressively. I can get behind it. I understand, you know, this is a good hand that has not a lot of showdown value, so winning the pot on turn, still very good. Even if we do get jammed on and don't realize the equity, but I guess this hand is just going to be a good one to mix in some bluffs, right? Because now obviously we have to just pure fold the river, and we don't get to, yeah, we just get bluffed by 5-3 suited. All right, king, queen, queen. High frequency C bet. Maybe a pure C bet, in fact. This is up there. We rolled a 98, so if we ever check king, queen, queen here, we're gonna check. I'm just gonna go with the safe option just in case this is a range bet. I'm gonna go small bet. Yeah, it's pretty dang close to a range bet. So sometimes I'll like slightly ignore the RNG, right? Like if I do think that there's a 5% frequency of something and I roll a 2 and I'm like, okay, well, in theory, I can check here. I usually just take the safe option if I'm not certain. The safe option I mentioned a couple of times so far is the option that I think is going to primarily be used in the scenario. Once we bet, we're not going to continue here. Let's go over a couple more spots and then jump into some play, because I feel like we've done a lot of single raise pot in position so far. So it's not like we're going to discover something groundbreaking, but we are finding out some interesting like minor details, right? Like not using the ace high combos as bluffs on that monotone board that we looked at, right? Like that was something that was eye-opening to me. Again, maybe I learned that a long time ago, but it's been a while since I've gone this in depth. 774 high frequency check board. Going to go ahead and check, which is completely wrong. Wow, why are we betting this often? Is it because we block the strongest trips, or is this just a texture that we're going to, I don't think this is a texture we're going to range bet on. Let me clear out some of my sims here. There we go. Yeah, this isn't a range bet spot. This is pretty close to the global check frequency. So why is it that we're pure betting ace deuce of clubs? Is it one of the hands that just performs best as like a triple barrel bluff because we block ace 7 suited, which is a, look at this standout combo here amongst the other ace deuce. Really loves using ace deuce as a bet. Even ace like 5 of clubs is a high frequency check. So specifically it's using the worst ace X combo, which to me says this is a great hand to use as a blocker hand. It blocks ace 7, it blocks ace 4. Those are going to be two hands that are going to need to call to the river sometimes. And the 2 is worthless, so our showdown value is a lot lower than something like ace, you know, ace 10 or ace 9. And you actually see ace king bet a high frequency as well. And this is more so for value. I think this one's going to be classified. If we take a look at good hands, we see that ace king of clubs is in the good hands. And so is ace deuce suited though. What's the equity difference? Is it close? So ace king has 63.5, ace two has only 52%. So very significant equity difference. How close is that to being a weak hand in the weak hand category? I think, yeah, so I think that's what it is that ace deuce suited is the worst ace that approaches the weak hand category that would fall into good hands to bluff with. And that's why we see it at a high frequency. Okay. So typically when you see a spot that's a pure bet on the flop and it goes check, check, I would have bet if they checked on the turn. All right, Jack, Jack 3. This is going to be a mix. This is around our global c-bet frequency, so I'm just going to go small bet here. We get raised. I don't think we're going to 3-bet this hand. Maybe we can, but I rolled very passive, so I'm just going to call. 6-6-3-10 on turn. We're going to face a lot of overbets, to which I think we have to just call. So after villain check raises and checks, this is a spot where we're going to have a lot of small bets, maybe some medium bets, but mostly we're going to small bet or check. I think this hand does benefit from betting in case villain did check raise something like ace x suited, maybe something like king queen suited. I don't know if they're check raising that combo, but we need a decent amount of protection from it if they are. So I think I like small betting here. And like I said, there's a little bit of half pot and even some large sizings. What are they going to check call that we get value from now? So I think it's mostly going to be like middling pairs, pocket fives, pocket fours, maybe some 3x, maybe something like pocket nines. I don't think they're going to have too much 10x, but most of our value is going to come from the middling pairs. So fours, fives, sevens, eights, and nines. Now, the problem is they have some full houses with this river 3. So I don't know if we want to go ahead and bet here, because if we do bet, we're going to bet large. And if we bet large, we want to have a very strong hand. This is very relevant to have jacks, because that's the threshold for which big blind can have strong pairs. They never have queens plus. So we only lose to full houses and we get paid by their middling pairs. So how many combos of, this is one of those scenarios where it's like, how many combos of each do they have and can we get value, right? I think it's thin because there's only something like 6 combos of sevens, right? Is it 6 combos for pairs? 6 combos of pairs, right? Or is it 8 or 9? No, it's 6, I think. So yeah, that's one of those things where you could probably sit there and count combos, but intuitively, I think this is very close. I think it's mostly going to be a check with maybe a small frequency of bet this hand. Because if we have 5s, 4s, 7s, 8s, and 9s, it's going to be like 30 combos of hands versus maybe they have some 10x too. And then how many 6x and 3x are they going to have played this way? Yeah, I think I'm going to check. Yeah, so again, see when I'm painstakingly counting combos, it's typically because we're indifferent, right? Because it's really close. So you have a mix of 60 in check. And villain shows up with a 6. So there you go. Especially since they have these offsuit combos, that counts for a lot of combos of full houses for the 6x. All right, one more hand and we'll wrap it up. 762, I think we're going to have all of the options here. Mostly check though. We rolled high. This hand likes to get to showdown. It has some showdown value. But there are a lot of weak aces out there. I'm going to check this time, but I think every option is okay. Yeah. Overbet less so, but every option other than overbet is okay. Turn. I think we can have a large better check. It's important to not always just bet a queen when you hit it here, because then when you check, back here on the turn, you're just going to get bluffed on the river at a high frequency. So I'm going to go ahead and check again on the turn. I'm surprised it's that high of a frequency of check. And now we're going to go for value, which is typically the large sizing. And that'll do it. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was interesting for me. We found some pretty cool spots. That monotone board spot was eye-opening. Thinking hard about, what our range looks like in every scenario really helps drill that into your thought process so that you can become better. And we're just going to keep running through these. I think they're not only helping you guys, hopefully, but it's also helping me as a player to consistently study and continue to get better. If you like this video and you like the series, please like and subscribe. It really does support the channel. I would love to make more of this content, and that helps support me in doing so. I'll see you guys on the next one.